You know what grinds my gears? The fact that IMs, which are supposed to be small and easy to drive, can still sound better when you move from something like this to something like this, which is definitely not portable. So that begs the question, can we get the sound quality somewhat close to this one without the size and the weight of this one? So that is something I've been searching for a long time. And within that context, today, let's talk about the new release from HiBy, the R3 Gen II. So at the front of the device, you have a 3.2-inch screen. At the back, glass panel. At the top, you also have glass panel, and the surrounding frame is aluminium. The control is pretty simple with the R3. On the side, you have the volume knob, which also acts as the power control. You have the playback control, forward, backward, and up here you have an indicator light that shows you the quality of the music that you are playing. At the back, at the bottom of the device, you have the USB-C for charging and data transfer, 3.5mm and 4.4 balance output. Yeah, and on the left hand side, you have the micro SD card. This time it has a rubber cover. As you can see, the R3 Gen II is not a very small device, but it fits very well in your palm and very easy for one-handed control. So here's R3 next to average dongles. For example, this is the HiBy XO, this is the FIO BTR5. So the R3 is larger than your average dongles. R3 is also larger than micro music players. For example, this one is the HiBy. This one is HiBy's AP80 Pro X. As you can see, the R3 Gen II is much larger, thicker. Interestingly, the arrangement of the controls and the overall design of both devices are pretty similar, with the volume knob on the side. Here's the R3 Gen II next to the Core Mojo 2. As you can see, the overall length and width of both devices are roughly similar, but the Mojo is way thicker than the R3 Gen II. And here is the R3 Gen II next to the previous version. I think this one, the Pro Saber. As you can see, the new version is taller and thicker than the old version. It's also heavier. The control and the placement of the ports have also been changed with the new version. So as you can see, the new version has the volume knob. The old version has control the volume using buttons. And the old version, I find that it is harder to find the playback button in the old version comparing to the new one, because the new one they separate the playback from the back button. The indicator light has also been changed with the new version. So the old version is just a normal LED light. The new version has some design element to hide into the antenna of the device. So the old version, the SD card is at the bottom. The new version, SD card is on the side. USB-C the same. The most significant change is the headphone jacks has been moved from top from the old version to the bottom with the new version. And the old version has the 2.5mm balance, the new version has 4.4mm balance, which in my opinion is better. And finally, for fun, here is the R3 Gen II next to HiBy DX300. Yeah, very similar size. So with the previous version of the HiBy OS, we will go directly to the list of music where you have only 3 options. When you pull from the left, you will have access to all the menu options. In the middle, you have access to your music, and when you pull from the right hand side, you will have the now playing page. And in the music list, you can only filter your music according to file, album, artist, or genres. With the new version, you actually have access. When you turn on the device, you have access to different menu items. And if you want to play your local music files on your SD card, you need to select music. And from here, you will have the same filtering features as the previous version. However, one new feature of the R3 Gen II is that you have the ability to filter your music according to album artist. So if you want to update your album or make modification to your playback options, all the menus are actually hidden way up here. So from here, you can choose to update your database. You can choose how you will deal with the SD file. You choose your playback mode, whether you want to loop just one track, play through the whole playlist, shuffle, or loop the whole list. As usual, you can select whether you want to resume from the last track or you want to resume from the exact location when you turn off and turn on the device. You can also turn on or turn off the gapless playback feature. Personally, I don't know why you want to turn off the gapless playback. You can select crossfade, gain mode, whether that is low gain or high gain. You can select whether you want to normalize your music or you want to just leave it alone. And because it is a HiBy device, you have access to the usual 10-band equalizer, and you have access to the special feature that is available on most HiBy players and HiBy OS device, which is MSEB. Essentially, this is a type of parametric EQ, 10 band if I remember correctly, and each of these bands has been placed at the correct place so that you can modify the different subjective aspects of the sound. For example, you can change the overall color of the tonality. That means tilting the frequency response to the treble or the bass. You can increase or decrease the bass extension, the sub bass, mid bass. You can change whether you want your vocal to be thicker or cleaner. You want female vocal forward or backward. Whether you want to control sibilance, and you can also control the amount of airiness in the sound. So each one of these options actually translates to a part of the frequency response. So very useful tool to have when you just want to make modification without touching the EQ. Now let's go back to the main menu. From the main menu, you also have access to the ability to stream music. Comparing to the old version, now you have access to Corpus as well. The previous version, you only have access to Tidal. So that means this device have built-in Wi-Fi. You can connect it to your home Wi-Fi, and when you click on Tidal, you would be given a QR code that you can use to authorize this device to your Tidal account so that it can start accessing your music. The playback quality is fine. The Wi-Fi signal was strong. The only problem is I cannot download Tidal music on this device for offline listening, which I assume to be limitation across all of the device that access the Tidal API in this way. Interestingly, this device can also read ebooks. The remaining options are accessible from here. For example, in the system menu, you can change language, brightness, backlight, font size, USB working mode. That means whether this device would send the data out. As for example, you can attach a dongle to the R3 and R3 can send the data to the dongle, or you can connect R3 to a laptop or another music player and use this as a dongle. So that is, you will change that using USB working mode. You can also change how the R3 interact with the computer when you connect R3 to a computer using a USB-C cable. Whether it would act as USB storage or it would act as an audio digital analog converter. There are also various options on how you can interact with the USB, for example, for the current limit, USB DAP feedback. In the wireless setting, you have a variety of options. For example, you can turn on Bluetooth, and with Bluetooth, you can use R3 to send the audio signal to a different device. For example, your Bluetooth headphone, or you can use R3 at the Bluetooth receiver, just like the BTR5 or similar kinds of device. About the Bluetooth quality, similarly to most devices with HiBy OS that I have tried so far, R3 Gen II still have problem when I try to connect it to my iPhone using the AAC. So either the connection would revert itself to SBC automatically, or there would be a lot of delays. So that means watching YouTube is not possible with R3 Gen II and an iPhone. I haven't got a chance to try with an LDAC or a different type of connection. In my experience, with this sort of device, connecting to LDAC usually gives you a better experience comparing to using AAC with iPhone. Here you have access to Wi-Fi options. You can have access to HiBy Link, which connect the R3 Gen II to the HiBy Music Player app on your phone, so you can control this device from your phone. So you can put this in your pockets and play with your phone, and you can still control the music. You can import music through Wi-Fi. You can use DLNA, and finally you have access to AirPlay. So how does this device sound? So after testing the R3 Gen II across most of my IEMs, from very easy to drive like Andromeda to the usual one, to the very difficult to drive like E5000 and 300 ohms earphones, I would say there are 4 main characteristics. The first one is neutrality. So that means this device does not add warmth and weight to your mid-range. Doesn't make it more, I can say, musical. It is what it is. But at the same time, different from other ESS-based devices, the R3 Gen II doesn't try to emphasize the upper frequencies, so it doesn't give you that clearly bright presentation that pretends to be more resolving, more detail, which is good. The second characteristic of the R3 Gen II is the note weight. So when you compare this against something with a stronger amplification, for example the DX300 or even the Korg Mojo 2, you will immediately find that the low mid-range and the bass of the R3 Gen II is a little bit more subdued. So that means everything is a little bit thinner, not very pounding, not very weighty. But at the same time, this device can still reproduce the transient attack, and it still reproduce the proper sub-bass, so there's still a sense of punchiness, even though it is not very weighty. The next characteristic of this device is the detail retrieval. So by detail retrieval, I mean the proper details, the nuance in the mid-range, in the bass and in the treble, across the frequency. In fact, the sense of detail was so competent that I need to do a careful A/B test against the Korg Mojo 2 the first day I listened to the R3 Gen II, because just from memory, it feels like these two devices are almost identical in terms of how resolving it is. And the last characteristic, which is something I really enjoy, is the sense of space that this device can reproduce. So as you know, when we listen to IEMs or headphones, the sense of space is baked into the music that you listen. So if you listen to a spacious recording, then your IEMs or headphone, if it is properly supported by your digital analog converter and amplifier, would be able to reproduce that sense of space. If you listen to very small recording with just one voice, one guitar, no ambience, then usually there's no sense, no space. So when I put on some very spacious classical recording, I found that this device does not get in the way of my IEMs. It allows my IEMs to spread the instrument out and also to separate the instrument from the background. So there's a sense of space like the projection forward. Of course, it is not at the same level as, say, the DX300 or my desktop setup, but it doesn't limit my IEMs too much to the point that I feel like I'm losing the performance. In fact, I've been listening to the R3 Gen II almost every day, and I haven't used my DX300 for a couple of days, but just because how convenient it is without losing that sense of space that I really appreciate. So how does the R3 Gen II compares against some other options? So the first comparison that I do with any device coming to my desk is against the Apple dongle. This is affordable, well measured, and supposedly decently sound. So I would say the immediate difference, the difference that you can find immediately between these two devices are the sense of space and the clarity. So with the Apple dongle, when I listen to the same recording that is supposed to be large and spacious, I find that everything is more condensed, like there's a less sense of layering from closer to further away with the Apple dongle. And the boundary, the clarity of separation between instruments is also weaker. So as a result, even when I use high-end IEMs, it still doesn't sound very interesting with the Apple dongle. But that's not the case with the R3 Gen II. The next comparison is between the R3 Gen II and the HiBy XO. This device also has dual ESS DAC chip and op-amp based amplifier. So I would say the sense of detail retrieval, like the technical performance of these devices, are very close. Maybe the R3 Gen II is a little bit more resolving, but that wouldn't be the determining factor to decide whether you buy this one or this one. The main difference between these two is in terms of the tonality or tuning. So the XO feels much more V-shaped compared to the R3 Gen II. You would hear more bouncy, you would hear more boosted bass, and at the same time you would also hear that famous brightness of the ESS with this device. So it's up to, in terms of the sound quality, I would say it's up to the taste. But of course, this is a dongle. It would have the cable and all sort of inconvenience that goes with the dongle. And this one device, that's all. So as I mentioned, I also did a short comparison between the R3 Gen II and the Korg Mojo. So the sense of detail retrieval is on the side of the Mojo. Mojo is a little bit more resolving. Mojo is noticeably more thicker, weightier in the note weight, in the low mid-range. So when you listen to, let's say, a cello recording, you would feel more power, more rumbleness with the Mojo comparing to the R3 Gen II. And of course, the Mojo has a few EQ setting and the ability to turn on crossfade, which further improve the perception of the soundstage imaging. But this device, it cannot do much on its own, and it is quite a bit more expensive comparing to the R3 Gen II. The next comparison was between the R3 Gen II and my DX300. So the DX300 is, I would say, half a step to one step ahead of this device in on aspect. So the soundstage would feel a little bit larger, deeper. There would be more weight in the presentation, and the sense of detail, the detail retrieval is also a little bit better, but it's larger. So the difference in the sonic quality between these devices would widen depending on the difficulty of the IEMs or headphones that you want to use. For example, when I use the Final Audio E5000, the R3 Gen II still managed to put up a good fight, but when I switch to the X300, I immediately hear stronger separation, stronger clarity with a better sense of space, when everything is more congested and more rounded when I listen to the R3 Gen II. The same situation when I listen to 300 ohms earbud. But this device still holds its own decently. It doesn't collapse the soundstage. It doesn't make everything squished together into one small dot. That is the case with most of the smaller devices. In terms of driving very sensitive IEMs like the Campfire Andromeda, at the lowest gain level on the balance, I still hear a little bit slightly hissing noise. It is not very intrusive, and you wouldn't hear it if you listen to normal music. But if you listen to classical music with very quiet section, you might be able to hear the hissing. Interestingly, that is not much different comparing to the DX300 and also the Korg Mojo. The only device that is completely quiet with the Andromeda that I have ever heard is the Topping G5. Finally, before I move on, let's have a quick comparison between the new one and the old one from the R3 series. So when switching from the new one to the old one, the gap in the sound quality reminds me of the gap between the R3 Gen II and the Apple dongle. So with this device, even with the very spacious IEM and some of the most spacious track in my playlist, I still feel that everything is more congested, everything is more squished together, and the sense of depth is not properly conveyed. So I would say the R3 Gen II is something that you can take with you, and you wouldn't worry about bottlenecking your fancy IEMs. But I would be concerned about that with the previous version. So the sonic quality is a solid improvement. Another improvement is the output. The old version used a 2.5mm output. The new version used a 4.4. That means you don't need adapter anymore. And of course, to me, the new version is more interesting because of the volume wheel. The old version used a button. So in conclusion, the R3 Gen II has been a pleasant surprise to me. Usually for a device of this form factor, you would have a lot of sacrifice in terms of sound quality. But I found that the sacrifice has not been very significant for the R3 Gen II. I still have a decent sense of space, the detail retrieval is good, the tonality is natural and easy to like. I would say the note weight and the power of the bass is something that could be improved. But of course you have onboard EQ if you want to change that way. So would I recommend the R3 Gen II? I would say yes, if you have a lot of offline music to load onto this device, and if you want something small and portable that you can bring with you without sacrificing your nicer IEMs. I'm still impressed by how much sound quality they have been able to squeeze into this smaller device. Hopefully, in 1 or 2 generations, this would be enough for on IEMs, so and I can safely leave something like this at home. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.